Arthur Moore stood frozen in the doorway, his heart racing as he witnessed a scene that shattered his world. Maya Williams, the household maid, was cradling his infant son, Bryce, nursing him with a tenderness that felt both foreign and infuriating. Her blouse was unbuttoned just enough for Bryce to latch on, his small body relaxed in her arms. Maya hummed a lullaby, her eyes closed, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Arthur's shock quickly morphed into rage. "You get your hands off my son," he roared, storming into the room. Maya's eyes flew open, and instinctively she detached Bryce from her breast, soothing him as he whimpered. "Mr. Moore, please let me explain," she said, her voice trembling. But Arthur was beyond listening. "You think you can just touch my child, feed him like some damn wet nurse?" His voice cracked with disbelief and fury. "This is my son, who the hell gave you the right?" Maya stood slowly, still holding Bryce protectively. "I didn't plan it. He hadn't eaten in days, the formula he kept rejecting. He was growing weaker. I used to be a neonatal nurse and I still produce milk. He needed it." Arthur stepped closer, his fists clenched at his sides. "You crossed a line," he hissed. "You don't touch what's mine, you don't make choices for my family." Without warning, he slapped her, the force sending Maya stumbling sideways, still clutching Bryce. The nursery fell silent, the air thick with tension. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her cheek, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stared at Arthur with wide, stunned eyes, then slowly turned her body to shield the child. "How dare you," she whispered. "I saved your son." Arthur's chest heaved, his hands still hanging in the air as if he couldn't believe what he had done. "I don't need saving from someone like you," he spat. "Someone like me," Maya echoed, her voice cutting through the air with quiet steel. "You mean Black Pura woman?" Arthur flinched but remained silent. "I lost a baby 3 months ago," Maya continued, her voice trembling but resolute. "I held him in my arms as he died. I know what it feels like to be helpless, to watch someone so small slip away while you stand there doing nothing. I saw that same look in Bryce yesterday, and I did what a mother does. I acted." Arthur turned away, raking his hands through his hair, the weight of her words settling in. Maya stepped forward, placing Bryce gently in his crib. The baby squirmed once, then stilled, his stomach finally full, his tiny body at peace. "I'll get my things," she said softly, walking toward the door. Arthur didn't stop her, but his hand trembled at his side. The corridor outside the nursery felt like a tunnel, and Maya's heart pounded with every step. Her cheek throbbed, and the echo of Arthur's palm still rang in her bones. But worse than the slap was the hatred in his eyes, the disbelief as if her humanity had been erased in that moment. Down the hall, one of the maids glanced up startled, but Maya said nothing. She walked past, silent, until she reached her quarters. Inside, she collapsed onto the bed, letting out the breath she'd been holding. Her bag sat in the corner, half-packed since the day she took this job. She stared at it, contemplating leaving, but even now her arms still felt the weight of Bryce. Her chest still remembered his need, and somewhere beneath the shame and fury she felt no regret. Back upstairs, Arthur stood alone beside the crib, looking down at his son, who was sleeping soundly for the first time in days. There was no struggle in the boy's face, no tight fists, no gasping cries, just peace. Arthur sat down heavily in the rocking chair, his face pale, his hands shaking. He stared at them, the same hands that once held his wife as she sobbed through postpartum nights, the same hands that today struck the only person who had made Bryce stop crying. Suddenly, Arthur Moore, CEO, billionaire widower, felt very, very small. In the stillness, Bryce stirred and let out a tiny coo. Arthur looked toward the door where Maya had walked out and whispered to himself, "What have I done?" Maya sat silently on the edge of her narrow bed, a cracked mirror reflecting her swollen cheek. Her skin stung, but what burned deeper was the humiliation. She had seen many things in her life, poverty, death, heartbreak, but never imagined being struck for saving a child. Outside, the Seattle sky had turned gray, the kind of overcast that settled like weight on your chest. She looked down at her hands, still holding the warmth of Bryce. She hadn't felt that kind of closeness since Elijah died. A soft knock startled her. It wasn't forceful, more like hesitation wrapped in guilt. She opened the door cautiously. Eleanor Moore stood on the threshold, dressed in a long burgundy house coat, silver-gray hair pulled into a tight twist, her expression unreadable. In one hand, she held a steaming cup of tea. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice even. Maya stepped aside. "Of course, ma'am." Eleanor sat without waiting for an invitation, setting the cup on the side table. Her sharp eyes studied the room, spare, clean, humble. "I was told what happened," she said. "Assume had mentioned it," Maya replied, her tone restrained. "He didn't, the butler heard the shouting, I had to ask." Eleanor leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I saw the look in your eyes last week, the way you held Bryce. You knew something was wrong before any of us did." "I used to work in NICU," Maya said softly. "I've seen that kind of hunger before, babies shutting down, they stop crying when they're too weak." Alina nodded. Arthur's grieving, but that doesn't excuse what he did. No, it doesn't. For a moment, the two women sat in silence, a strange current passing between them, not of sympathy but understanding, generational, maternal. You could press charges, Alina said. Maya looked at her startled. I won't, she said quietly. He's broken, I know what that feels like. Alina let out a slow breath. You're stronger than most. I don't want to be, Maya admitted. I just want to do right. Alina's eyes flicked toward Maya's suitcase in the corner. Are you planning to leave? I thought I should, Maya replied. After what happened, it's clear I don't belong here. Alina stood and walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. You saved my grandson, you didn't cross a line, you stepped in where we failed. If you think Maya is a good person, give her a like and don't forget to let us know where you're watching this video from. Someone nearby might be quietly watching this story along with you. Then she turned back to Maya. If you leave, it should be your choice, not because a man lashed out in pain. She left without another word. Maya sat back down, her heart thudding. Part of her wanted to run, but something deeper whispered, stay. Later that morning, Arthur sat alone in his study, surrounded by dark mahogany bookshelves and the ticking of the antique clock above the mantel. He hadn't slept. The slap replayed in his mind again and again. It had been reflex, irrational, ugly, raw. A lifetime of bottled grief had exploded in 1 second. He looked at his reflection in the glass of the liquor cabinet. His face was pale, older than yesterday. The man staring back was a stranger. There was a soft chime from the intercom. Mr. Moore, came the butler's voice. Mrs. Alina asks that you join her in the conservatory. She says it's urgent. Arthur sighed. Tell her I'll be there. The conservatory was filled with natural light, an open space of warmth and greenery, far from the cold energy of the rest of the house. His mother stood near the bay window, watching the rain start to patter. You wanted to see me. Alina turned, Sid. Arthur obeyed, more from childhood habit than choice. She didn't mince words. You hit her. Arthur closed his eyes. It wasn't. I don't want excuses, he looked up at her. I was scared, Mom. I walked in and saw. You saw your son safe, finally feeding, resting, and you punished the woman who made that possible. She crossed a line. She saved your child. Arthur stared down at his hands. I don't even know who she really is. She's quiet, keeps to herself. I never even. Then maybe it's time you did, Alina interrupted. He looked up. She lost a baby. Arthur's throat tightened. I made a mistake. Then fix it. That evening, Maya walked into the kitchen to return her uniform. Her contract was hourly, nothing official, nothing binding, just another name on a long list of help rotating through the Moore estate. She didn't expect a second chance. But when she opened the door to the laundry room, Arthur was there. He looked exhausted, still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, tie loosened. Maya began. I know, Arthur said. I wanted to catch you before you left. She said nothing. He looked at the floor, then met her eyes. I'm sorry, he said, for what I said and what I did. I was furious, not at you, at myself, at everything I can't fix. Maya's arms crossed, a subtle defense. I didn't do it for thanks or sympathy. I know you did it for Bryce, and because that's who you are. A long pause. I want to make this right, Arthur added. I can't change what I did, but I don't want you to go. Maya raised an eyebrow. You're asking me to stay. He nodded, as his caregiver, not a maid, someone we trust. Maya studied him. It won't be easy. Nothing important ever is. I won't take another slap, she said calmly. You shouldn't have taken the first. Another beat of silence, then Maya sighed. I'll stay for Bryce, but if you ever raise your hand to anyone like that again. I won't, Arthur said, I swear. As she turned to go, she stopped at the doorway. Mr. Moore, she said. Yes. You're not the only one who lost something, but your son still has a chance. Then she left, her steps steady, her head high, unaware that in that moment Arthur Moore realized he hadn't just asked a maid to stay. He'd asked a woman who already knew what it meant to fight for a child. And maybe, just maybe, she'd end up saving more than one. The next morning, Maya moved quietly through the Moore household. The sharp sting on her cheek had faded into a dull ache. The air felt different, not lighter, but charged, as if something fragile had shifted ever so slightly. She stepped into the nursery just as the first beams of sunlight slipped through the lace curtains. Bryce stirred in his crib, his tiny arms stretching above his head. When he saw Maya, a sleepy smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It was barely a twitch, but it warmed her deeply. Good morning, little man, she whispered, lifting him gently into her arms. She rocked him with ease, humming softly. This time there was no hesitation. Her touch was sure, her purpose clear. Maya Williams, once a nurse, once a grieving mother, now stood as the unlikely guardian of a billionaire's son. Downstairs, Arthur sat at the breakfast table, his untouched coffee growing cold. Alina was already sipping her tea, eyes flicking over the morning paper. The tension between them was quiet, restrained, but not invisible. She stayed, Alina said without looking up. Arthur nodded. I know. She did it for Bryce, not for you. I know that too. Alina folded the newspaper, setting it aside. Don't squander the second chance, Arthur. Not with her, not with your son. If there's one thing I've learned in 72 years, it's that pride doesn't hold a baby through the night. People do. Arthur didn't answer, his fingers drummed against the ceramic mug. He had built companies on logic, on discipline, on precision. But this fatherhood was chaos he hadn't budgeted for. By mid-afternoon, Maya noticed the change. The housekeepers whispered more than usual. The butler barely met her eyes. One of the maids, Grace, a young woman with soft features and a mean streak, looked her up and down with a twisted smirk. So, Grace said as they passed in the hallway, you're the one who's breastfeeding the billionaire's kid now. Maya stopped, her shoulders stiffening, but she didn't turn around. You know, Grace continued, her voice saccharine, I used to think you were just quiet, but now I see it. You're playing the long game, closer to the baby, closer to the will, clever. Maya turned slowly, her voice calm, sharp as glass. If I wanted money, Grace, I'd sue your boss for assault and own this damn house by now. Grace's smile faltered. Maya leaned in just enough for her words to sting. I don't play games with children, and I don't compete with girls who gossip behind closed doors. Then she walked away, but as she turned the corner, something nagged at her. She hadn't considered how her role would be perceived by the others in the house. The whispers, the stares, they weren't just about race or class, they were about fear. Maya had crossed an invisible line, and in doing so, she'd become a threat. That evening after dinner, Arthur approached Maya in the hallway outside the nursery. He was dressed casually, no suit, no tie, just a simple button-up and dark slacks. The sharp angles of his face looked softer in the warm hallway light. May I speak with you, he asked. Maya crossed her arms. You're speaking. Arthur exhaled. I've asked a therapist to visit the house for Bryce, maybe for me too. Maya raised a brow. That's a start. I also want to formalize your role, not just as a caregiver, but as a guardian when I travel, with full rights, medical decisions, emergency protocols, everything. Maya's expression hardened slightly. Why now? Because I saw how everyone looks at you today like you don't belong, but you do. Maya shook her head. Belonging isn't paperwork, Mr. Moore, it's earned. I know, that's why I'm asking for your trust again. She studied him for a moment. I'll consider it, but not for you, for Bryce. He nodded, swallowing whatever pride he'd held on to, for Bryce. Later that night, Maya stood alone in the garden behind the estate. The city's glow flickered beyond the hills. The wind whispered through the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. She pulled her shawl tighter and closed her eyes. The quiet was broken by soft footsteps. Didn't expect company, she said without turning. Alina's voice came gently from behind. You seemed like someone who needed a reminder. Of what? That you're not alone. Maya opened her eyes. It doesn't feel that way. You are, Alina said bluntly. You're a black woman in a house built by white men with old money. You stepped out of the place they wrote for you. That scares them. So what do I do? Maya asked, her voice tight. You stand tall, you stay sharp, and you don't let them drag you back down. Maya turned to her. Even if it gets worse. Alina nodded, especially if it gets worse. That night, as the house settled into silence, Maya checked on Bryce one last time. The baby slept peacefully, arms spread like angel wings, a soft snore puffing from his nose. She watched him, her heart full of a strange ache, part grief, part purpose. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know how deep the whispers would cut. But she knew this, she was not going anywhere, not yet, not while this child still needed her, and not while the truth still waited to be uncovered behind every stare, every whisper, every shadow in the house. The morning in the Moore household came with orchestration, the hum of the espresso machine downstairs, the rustling of newspapers in the drawing room, the measured clatter of polished shoes against marble. But Maya, now assigned as Bryce's full-time caregiver, had learned to move in silence. Her world was timed to the rhythm of a baby's needs, not the rituals of wealth. Bryce giggled from his playpen in the conservatory, his tiny fingers gripping a plush giraffe. Maya watched him with a quiet smile, crouched beside him, holding a soft cloth in one hand and his milk bottle in the other. He had grown stronger, brighter. His once tired eyes now followed her every movement. Good morning, sunshine, she whispered, brushing his curls. The sliding glass door behind her opened with a soft whoosh. Arthur entered, tablet in hand. He hesitated at the threshold, watching his son with a look somewhere between awe and regret. Bryce squealed at the sight of him and reached up. Arthur crossed the room, crouched down, and lifted the boy with both arms. "Hey buddy, you sleep well?" Bryce burbled happily, his chubby hands patting Arthur's collar. Maya stood slowly, watching them. "He's gaining weight," she noted. "His appetites are consistent now." Arthur nodded. "That's your doing, thank you." Maya simply inclined her head, then turned to gather the toys scattered on the floor. She didn't need praise. She needed consistency, safety, and answers. "Listen," Arthur said as Bryce cooed in his arms. "I want to show you something." After his nap, she looked at him cautiously. "Show me what?" Arthur hesitated. "Something I should have looked at a long time ago." 3 hours later, after Bryce had been rocked into a deep sleep, Maya followed Arthur down a long, dim hallway lined with dusty portraits. He led her into his late wife Claire's private study, untouched since her death. It was a room filled with warmth, yellow curtains, worn books, pictures of family moments frozen in time. Arthur walked to the far cabinet and unlocked it with a brass key. He pulled out a black leather ledger thick with years of receipts, letters, and scribbled notes. "This was Claire's," he said, laying it flat on the desk. "She kept track of everything. Every donation, every check, every caregiver application. She was meticulous." Maya stepped forward slowly. "Why are you showing me this?" Arthur flipped to a bookmarked page. "Because 2 days before she died, she wrote your name down." Maya blinked. "What?" Arthur nodded. "I didn't even know she'd met you." Maya took a breath. "I never met her formally. I applied for a nurse position through a referral service. They said the family had already hired someone. I never heard back." Arthur pointed to a sticky note faded with time. "Maya Williams, calm eyes, caring spirit, could be the one." He looked up. "She saw something in you, and now I'm wondering if she saw what I didn't." Maya ran her fingers lightly over the page. "She must have interviewed me when I brought Elijah to the clinic." Arthur furrowed his brow. "Your son?" Maya nodded. "He was sick. I didn't have insurance. A woman came to the waiting room. She sat beside me, talked to Elijah, asked about my life. She never gave her name." Arthur sank into the chair behind the desk, his voice low. "That was Claire. She did that kind of thing, disguised kindness, anonymous charity." Silence fell between them as both tried to connect the invisible threads that now stretched backward through time. Then Meyer asked, "Why now?" Arthur closed the book gently. "Because I think Claire was trying to tell me something about you, about who should have been here all along." That night, as Maya prepared Bryce's bedtime bottle, she felt a new weight settle in her chest. Claire had chosen her. Even in silence, even in death, this woman, this stranger, had tried to build a bridge. She thought of the hostility in Grace's voice, the cold looks from the staff, the slap that still echoed in her bones. And she thought, no one gets to rewrite my place here. Later, while checking on Bryce, Maya found something odd, an old toy rattle with the initials M carved into the wood. It was unlike the others in the room, worn, hand-painted, and clearly loved. She took it downstairs to the butler. Mr. Halford, a wiry man in his 60s with a stony face and eyes that saw everything, looked up. "Do you know whose this was?" Halford took the rattle, eyes narrowing. "This belonged to Edward, Arthur's older brother." Maya blinked. "Arthur has a brother." Had, Halford corrected. "Edward died when he was 6, drowned in the estate pond. Tragic." She tilted her head. "I didn't see a grave." "There isn't one," Halford said, lowering his voice. "Family covered it up. His mother never forgave herself. Claire never talked about it." Maya's instincts buzzed. The rattle, the name, the missing chapter. Then she asked, "Did Claire ever go near that pond?" Halford hesitated. "Sometimes she'd walk there alone, just stand looking." Maya stared at the rattle in her hand. There were ghosts in this house, and not all of them stayed in the past. That night, as thunder rumbled low in the distance, Maya wrote in her journal by the glow of a small desk lamp. "Claire knew about me, about something else, something deeper. Bryce isn't just a child caught in grief. He's the key to a legacy full of secrets." She paused, tapping the pen lightly. "In this house, this family, they're not just mourning the dead, they're hiding them." She closed the journal, set it in her drawer, and locked it. Tomorrow she would visit the pond alone, because sometimes the truth doesn't knock on doors. Sometimes it whispers beneath the water. At dawn, while the estate still slumbered and the sky bled pale gold over the treetops, Maya slipped out through the kitchen door. She wore a thick cardigan and sturdy shoes, the old rattle with the initials M tucked in her pocket. A light mist curled across the grass, wrapping the grounds in a ghostly hush. The pond lay beyond the hedges, past the orchard, hidden behind a veil of wild rose bushes and birch trees. It wasn't mentioned in the estate's blueprints. It wasn't visited during garden tours, but it was there still, dark and forgotten. She found it easily. It sat in a shallow hollow, water black and unmoving. A rotting bench leaned crooked near the bank, half sunken into the mossy earth. Dragonflies hovered over the water, wings catching the light like stained glass. Maya stood at the edge, heart thudding, eyes scanning the still surface. It didn't look like a place where a child once drowned. It looked like it had been waiting. She pulled the rattle from her pocket. The wood was smooth from decades of handling. She turned it over in her fingers, then glanced toward the trees. "Claire," she whispered, "why did you bring me here?" The breeze shifted, and with it came the faintest creak of the old bench. Maya sat slowly, letting her eyes drift across the pond. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, watching, holding its breath. Then she noticed the stones just beneath the surface. Near the center of the pond, something geometric shimmered. Maya stepped forward cautiously, squinting. It looked like a foundation, a square structure submerged just beneath the murky surface. She crouched by the water's edge, her fingers brushing the damp moss. That was no accident. Someone had built something here long ago. Then deliberately it had been flooded. She stood unsettled. As she turned to leave, her foot struck something hard. She looked down and kicked gently at the dirt. A piece of stone peeked through. She knelt, brushing it clean with her sleeve. It was a marker, faint worn lettering nearly erased by time and rain. Edward Moore, beloved son, 1972 to 1978. Her breath caught. The grave was here, hidden, alone. Suddenly everything clicked, the secrecy, the whispers, Alina's guilt, Arthur's silence. This child, Arthur's older brother, had not just drowned, he'd been erased. Back at the house, Maya moved quickly through the back corridors. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she felt something pressing, urging her forward. The rattle still sat in her coat pocket like a talisman, warm from her palm. In the library, she found an old family photo album wedged between two forgotten encyclopedias. She flipped through pages of stage portraits, birthdays, weddings, business galas. But Edward appeared only twice, once as a baby in Claire's arms, once standing beside Arthur, both boys in matching suits. Then nothing. She frowned. Even in the wealthiest families, children weren't just deleted from memory. She was still flipping pages when Alina entered quietly behind her. "You found him," the older woman said softly. Maya turned, startled. "The grave." Alina continued, "You went to the pond." Maya nodded slowly, closing the album. "Why was he buried there?" Alina sighed, walking to the window. "Because my husband was a man who believed weakness should be hidden. Edward wasn't like the other boys. He was delicate, sensitive. There were whispers back then about his behavior, his speech, his tendencies. Words like defective were used. My husband couldn't bear it." Maya's chest tightened, "So he was kept out of sight." "Yes," Alina said, her voice brittle. "Claire fought for him, but by then the silence had already taken root, and when he drowned, we buried him in shame." Maya's jaw clenched. "That wasn't his shame to carry." "No," Alina agreed. "It was ours, and it haunts this house." They stood in silence for a long moment. "Claire used to sit by that pond every morning," Alina said at last. "She called it her penance." Maya took a breath. She left the rattle. Alina nodded. "And you found it." Later that evening, Arthur stood in the nursery watching Maya feed Bryce. Her arms moved with instinct, her voice low and soothing. The boy's eyes fluttered with sleep. There was a calm in the room that Arthur hadn't felt since Claire died. "I owe you the truth," he said suddenly. Maya looked up. "About Edwards?" "About everything." "I already know," she replied, "or enough of it to understand." Arthur exhaled. "When I was a boy, I used to sneak out to see him. My father forbade it, but Edward, he was kind. He taught me how to fold paper cranes. He used to hum lullabies. He was light in a very dark house." He looked down, his voice tight. "And when he died, no one mourned him properly. They just buried the memory." Maya nodded. "Claire tried. She left breadcrumbs." Arthur met her gaze. "And you followed them." There was another pause, then Maya said softly, "Bryce deserves better than ghosts. He deserves a family that doesn't bury the parts that hurt." Arthur crossed the room and gently took his son from her arms, cradling him. "He will," he said, "because of you." Maya hesitated. "What happens now?" Arthur looked at her, his voice resolute. "We bring Edward back into this house, we speak his name, we honor him, and we start doing what we should have done years ago." "And the staff?" Maya asked. "The judgment, the whispers." "They'll learn," Arthur said, "or they'll leave." Maya nodded, lips pressed tight. Then she said something that surprised even her. "Let me help you do it." Arthur blinked. "You're staying?" "Yes," she said, "but this isn't just about care, it's about truth." A long beat, then Arthur smiled, genuine, tired, and full of something Maya hadn't seen before, hope. As the rain began to fall outside, the nursery became more than a room. It became a beginning for Bryce, for Edward, for Maya, and for a man trying to rewrite the sins of his past. The next morning, a storm rolled over the estate, drenching the lawns and shrouding the mansion in gray mist. Maya stood at the breakfast counter, stirring oatmeal on the stove. Bryce sat in his high chair, babbling between spoonfuls of mashed banana, his face smeared with sunshine and mischief. Arthur entered, freshly shaven, carrying a folder in one hand. "We start today," he said. Maya glanced up. "Start what?" "Redemption," he replied, sliding the folder onto the table. "A memorial for Edward, official, public, he won't be forgotten again." Maya looked at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "It's overdue." They sat down together after breakfast and reviewed Claire's old notes, the few childhood photos they'd salvaged, and the handwritten letter she had once left hidden in a poetry book. In it, Claire had written, "The shame is not in who Edward was, the shame is in our silence." Arthur read it aloud, his voice cracking at the final line. He cleared his throat. "We'll commission a plaque, hold a small gathering." Alina said she'd speak. Maya rested her fingers lightly on the page. "And the pond?" "We'll restore it," he said. "Clean it up, put a proper stone there. Claire would have wanted that." As they worked, Maya noticed something else. Arthur was changing. The sharpness in his manner was softening, the rigidity in his spine easing. The guilt had weathered him for years, but now it seemed purpose was smoothing over the cracks. But not everyone welcomed change. Later that afternoon, Maya passed Grace in the hallway. The maid stood near the linen closet, arms crossed, a smug smile playing on her lips. "I heard there's going to be a ceremony," Grace said lightly. "Funny, I thought dead secrets stayed buried." Maya met her eyes. "Edward deserves peace." "Edward's gone," Grace hissed. "But you're not, and some people think you're getting too comfortable." Maya stepped forward, her voice low. "If you know something, say it, otherwise stay out of my way." Grace scoffed. "You think being close to that baby makes you untouchable, but you're just another help with a sob story. Don't forget your place." "I didn't forget," Maya replied calmly. "I just never accepted the one you tried to put me in." Before Grace could respond, a door creaked open nearby. Alina emerged from her parlor, gaze landing on both women. Her expression was unreadable, but her words were clear. "Grace," she said, voice like a gavel, "I think the linens can wait. Go check the silver in the dining hall." Grace hesitated, then stormed off. Alina turned to Maya. "Don't let the snakes distract you. They hiss loudest when they're afraid." Maya smiled faintly. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Alina said, "but don't thank me until the ceremony's over. Some ghosts don't like being disturbed." That night, after Bryce had been bathed and tucked into bed, Maya wandered the halls. The storm had passed, leaving behind streaks of moonlight on the polished floors. She carried Claire's poetry book under her arm, unsure why, but drawn by a feeling. She paused outside Claire's study. The door was ajar. Inside, the room glowed with soft lamplight. Alina sat at the desk, flipping through an old ledger. Maya knocked lightly. "I didn't mean to intrude." Alina glanced up. "Come in, you should see this." Maya stepped closer. Alina turned the ledger toward her. It wasn't Claire's handwriting this time. It was the late Mr. Moore's scrawled notes, dated columns, and one page circled in red ink. Maya squinted. "What am I looking at?" Alina tapped the page. "Payments to a private clinic monthly for 7 years after Edward's death." Maya's eyes widened. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," Alina said grimly, "if he didn't die." Maya stared at the page. "Are you saying Edward might be alive?" Alina folded her hands. "Or someone was being paid to say he wasn't." The revelation slammed into Maya like cold water. She looked down at the rattle, now permanently tucked in her coat pocket. The initials, the hidden grave, the sealed records, it all seemed less like tragedy and more like a cover-up. "Why would they fake his death?" she asked. "Shame," Alina said, "and control. My husband didn't want a blemish on the Moore name. But Claire, she may have moved him, hidden him, kept him safe." "That would explain the payments, the secrecy." Maya's hands trembled. "We need to find out where the money went and who cashed the checks." Maya nodded slowly. "I'll help." Alina gave a rare, wistful smile. "Good, because the walls in this house, they're starting to talk, and I think they're talking to you." Later, in the quiet of her room, Maya sat at her writing desk and opened her journal. "There is a line between what we remember and what we hide. Today I crossed it. The dead may not always be dead, and justice may still have a path." She tapped the pen, her breath steadying. "If Edward is out there, someone knows, and I intend to find them." She closed the journal and whispered into the still air, "Claire, if you're guiding me, don't stop now." The house creaked in response. Outside, the wind picked up, and somewhere beneath the surface of years of silence, the truth stirred, ready to rise. The next morning, the estate pulsed with subtle tension. Staff moved with more restraint. Whispers curled in corners like smoke, and the weight of unsaid truths made the air feel thick. Maya could feel it in every room she passed. The walls knew and they were tired of keeping quiet. In Claire's study, Arthur joined Maya and Alina just after sunrise. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, a sign that he was done with denial. Alina had printed copies of the ledger pages from the previous night and placed them on the table beside a pot of fresh coffee. Arthur scanned the page with furrowed brows. "You're certain these payments continued after Edward's death?" Meyer answered for Alina. "Same amount, same recipient code, but the bank account traces to a small private facility in upstate New York, one specializing in behavioral rehabilitation and trauma therapy." Arthur sank into the leather armchair. Claire must have placed him there. Alina nodded, "And your father let her so long as it stayed off the record." Maya pushed forward. "We need to find out if he's still there or if he was ever there." Arthur stood abruptly. "I'll call my attorney." Quietly, Alina's voice cut in firm and low. "If he's alive, Arthur, you don't get to decide what happens next. Claire chose to protect him. You'll need to do more than discover him. You'll need to earn him." Arthur didn't argue. His silence was agreement. That afternoon, while Alina contacted the clinic under the guise of a historical family inquiry, Maya took Bryce for a walk across the grounds. The boy giggled in his stroller, pointing at birds, leaves, and passing clouds as if he were naming stars. Maya felt a strange calm in her chest. She had no certainty of what they'd find, but something deep within her whispered that she was where she needed to be. As they reached the edge of the orchard, a voice called from behind, "You don't belong here." Maya turned to find Grace standing by the gate, arms folded, eyes cold. "You've been stirring things up," Grace continued, digging through graves, turning Arthur against his own blood. Maya stepped between the stroller and Grace instinctively. "I'm helping this family heal something you clearly have no interest in." Grace scoffed. "Heal or replace? Don't think we don't see it. You with your careful voice and wounded eyes, pretending you're the savior, but you're just convenient." Maya's expression didn't change. "If truth makes you uncomfortable, maybe you're standing on the wrong side of it." Grace stepped closer. "You should have stayed in your place." "And what place is that?" Maya asked quietly. "The one that doesn't rewrite family history." Just then, Alina's voice rang out behind them. "Grace," the older woman stiffened. Alina approached slowly, her cane tapping the stones. "You've said enough. Maya has more dignity in one finger than you've shown in 30 years. Grace's face twisted, but she said nothing. She turned and stormed back toward the house. Alina sighed, snake still slithering. Maya chuckled softly. At least they hissed loud enough to hear. Later that evening, a phone call came from the clinic. Arthur took it in the drawing room, hands shaking slightly. When he returned to Maya and Alina, his face was pale, eyes wide. They confirmed he was admitted under the name Edward Graves, Arthur said. Same birth date, same photo Claire gave them. He was there for 19 years. "And now?" Maya asked. Arthur swallowed. "He left 6 years ago voluntarily, no forwarding address, but they say he was gentle, kind, quiet. They kept a journal he wrote in. It's locked in storage. They'll release it if we come in person." Alina sat down heavily, "So he might be anywhere." Arthur nodded. Maya stood. "Then we go find the journal." The next morning, Arthur and Maya boarded a small charter plane bound for New York. Alina stayed behind with Bryce, watching from the terrace with a hand on the child's shoulder. As the car disappeared down the estate drive, Arthur said little during the flight. Maya read quietly, but her mind buzzed with questions. Who had Edward become? Did he know he'd been loved? Did he even remember them? The clinic sat on a quiet hill surrounded by pine trees and shrouded in fog. It was modest, old-fashioned, its brick exterior softened by ivy and time. A nurse named Carol met them at the gate. "He was our most polite resident," she said warmly. Never raised his voice, spoke softly, painted landscapes. She led them to the archives room where an assistant retrieved a small cedar box. Inside was a weathered journal, its cover hand-stitched with a simple tree. Meyer opened it gently. The handwriting inside was delicate, slanted, and precise. "Today I remembered a song, my mother's voice. I can't remember the words, but I remember her laugh when I got them wrong." She turned the page. "There was a girl at the pond once. She had red shoes. She told me not to cry when I slipped, that I was brave." Arthur inhaled sharply. "That was Claire," he whispered. "She always wore red flats by the pond." Maya flipped further. The entries became sparse, lonelier. "I wonder if they remember me or if I'm just a shadow in someone else's house." She closed the journal slowly. "He's out there," Maya said. "Somewhere," Arthur nodded, "and we're going to find him." She met his eyes. "No, we're going to bring him home." The wind cut sharper upstate. As Arthur and Maya drove through quiet back roads flanked by red barns and fields gone gold with fall, the weight of the journal sat between them like a third passenger. Each page had peeled back a layer of a man once erased, now slowly returning from the fog of silence. They returned to the city and with Aliner's help hired a private investigator, a quiet, well-dressed man named Reuben Hale, whose specialty was tracking down long-lost family. Over coffee in the estate's conservatory, Reuben set down the worn leather briefcase that never left his side. "I don't promise miracles," Reuben said, "but your brother didn't just vanish. People leave traces, patterns, choices." Maya handed over the journal. "Start here." For 2 weeks, the estate settled into an odd rhythm. Arthur resumed managing the business remotely, but his late nights were now filled with long walks and hesitant talks with Aliner. Maya took charge of the nursery for Bryce and quietly sorted through the lingering pieces of Claire's old storage trunk, searching, always searching. Then one rainy Thursday morning the call came. Reuben's voice was calm but electrified. "We found someone." Maya sat up straight on the edge of the couch. "Where?" "Pennsylvania. A man going by the name Lee Garrison lives in a small apartment above a used bookstore, paid in cash, keeps to himself, teaches children how to paint at the local community center." Arthur, who had been standing nearby, dropped his cup. "It's him." "He has no legal records before 2001, Reuben said, "but his handwriting matches the journal." 3 days later, Meyer and Arthur stood across the street from Page and Willow, a brick bookstore with ivy creeping up its sides. Through the rain-speckled glass, they saw a man arranging canvases behind the counter, tall, thin, gray at the temples. He moved with deliberate gentleness. He wore a cardigan with a torn cuff and sneakers that looked older than Bryce. Arthur's voice cracked. "I don't know if I can do this." Maya touched his arm. "You must." They crossed the street. Inside, the bell over the door chimed softly. The man turned. For a moment, nothing passed between them except time. Then Arthur whispered, "Edward." The man blinked, his bright blue eyes searching, settling on Arthur's face. I haven't heard that name in decades." Arthur stepped forward, trembling. "I'm your brother." The man, Edward, Ali, whoever he had become, looked stunned. He reached out as if afraid the moment would break. "I thought you all forgot." Maya watched the scene with tears prickling behind her eyes. The air shimmered between the men like something sacred, recognition without words, reunion born from silence. Arthur said, "Claire left me clues. She never stopped loving you." Edward's lips trembled. "She saved me, took me away before the doctors did what father wanted. She found people who hid me, protected me. I took a new name, lived quiet, safe." Maya stepped forward. "She left a trail for us, and now she brought you back." Edward looked at her. "You're the one from the journal." She blinked. "What?" "You came to the pond. I saw you there holding my rattle." Arthur stared between them. "How?" Edward smiled faintly. "You think I left without ever looking back? No, I returned a few years ago. I stood by the pond. I saw her grave, and then I saw you. You looked like someone who could carry a truth." Maya covered her mouth with her hand. Edward continued, "But I didn't think you'd ever come this far." Arthur stepped forward again. "Will you come home?" Edward looked around at the little bookstore. "I built peace here." "But your name," Arthur said, "deserves to live again." A long pause, then Edward nodded slowly. "I'll come for Claire and for the boy." Arthur blinked. "Bryce." Edward's smile deepened. "He looks just like she did when she was little, the same eyes." Arthur didn't speak. He only moved forward, and the two men embraced, 40 years of silence collapsing into one trembling, tearful moment. Back at the estate, Aliner stood on the terrace with Maya. Bryce toddled through puddles, giggling. "They are on their way," Maya said. Aliner closed her eyes. "Then this house will be whole again." The car arrived at dusk. Edward stepped out slowly. He wore a coat too thin for the cold, and Maya immediately took it upon herself to fetch a warmer one from the hall closet. Aliner met him on the steps. Her voice shook. "You look just like your father did, but gentler." Edward smiled. "And you haven't changed at all." They hugged tightly. Arthur came to Maya's side as she watched them. "You brought us back something we didn't know we needed." "No," Maya said quietly. "Claire did." As night settled and the fire roared in the grand hall, Edward sat beside Aliner and Arthur, Bryce asleep in Maya's lap. Stories began to rise, memories long buried. It wasn't a perfect reunion, but it was real, and sometimes that was enough. The house, once echoing with secrets, now murmured with life again. Edward's presence sent a subtle ripple through every room. Staff treaded softer, Aliner smiled more easily, and Arthur seemed less burdened, even in silence. But peace, Maya knew, was never free. It came at the cost of confrontation, and the ghosts of the past rarely went quietly. On the second morning of Edward's return, Maya woke early. The sky outside was thick with fog, the kind that blurred the edges of truth. As she made her way down the grand staircase, she found Edward already seated in the library, leafing through an old photo album with shaking hands. He looked up and smiled. I forgot how many faces we used to know. Maya sat across from him. Time buries so much. Edward closed the book, but not everything stays buried, does it? Maya tilted her head. Is there something you're not telling me? He hesitated. There's something I overheard years ago, right before Claire took me away. Maya leaned in. Father, he didn't just want me gone. He wanted everything that could connect me to the family gone. There were letters Claire had written to a reporter, a friend she trusted, trying to expose how Edward Moore Sr. had threatened doctors to classify me as unstable. She was going to go public. Maya's eyes widened, but nothing ever surfaced. Edward nodded because someone stopped it. I believe those letters were intercepted. By whom? I don't know, but Claire told me to trust only Alina if something ever happened. She said Alina knew more than she let on. Later that morning, Maya found Alina on the back patio sipping tea, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Bryce toddled nearby, chasing a wind-blown leaf with single-minded joy. Alina, Maya began gently, what do you know about Claire's attempt to go public? The older woman didn't flinch. I warned her not to, told her the family would tear itself apart before it admitted to what it had done. Did you help hide her letters? Alina's expression turned stern. No, but I helped hide her. After your son died, you understood what it meant to grieve in silence. Claire was grieving long before that for the brother they tried to erase. Maya's voice lowered. Edward thinks someone close stopped her. Alina sighed. Your instincts are right, but be careful. The rot in this house isn't just in the past, it breathes. That afternoon, Arthur called a family meeting in the drawing room. The air was tense. Bryce had been put down for his nap, and the only sound in the room was the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Arthur stood facing Alina, Maya, and Edward. I've decided to amend the family trust, he said. Edward's name will be restored, his inheritance will be reinstated. Alina nodded. Edward looked down. Maya said nothing. Grace, standing near the hallway door with a tea tray, froze for just a second too long. Maya caught it. Arthur continued. And Maya, should she choose to remain, will be appointed as guardian to Bryce in the event of my death, legal, final. A clatter cut through the room. The tea tray hit the floor. Grace stood, eyes wide with something between shock and rage. I knew it, she hissed. Everyone turned. You brought her here. Let her nurse your son, dig up graves, rewrite history so you could replace us. Arthur's voice was cold. Grace, you were never family. Oh, but I was closer than she'll ever be, Grace spat, her voice shaking. Ask her what she found in the attic. Ask her about the letters. Maya stood. You knew. Grace's eyes darted. Claire trusted me once, then she started asking too many questions, writing things down. I had no choice. You destroyed them, Maya said. No, Grace said slowly, I hid them. The room held its breath. Why? Alina asked almost gently. Grace's voice cracked. Because they would have destroyed everything. You think this house runs on truth, it runs on silence. Arthur stepped forward. You're done here, leave this house. Grace laughed bitterly. Throw me out, but it won't change who you are or who your father was. She turned on her heel and stormed out. The front door slammed seconds later. Maya turned to Arthur. We have to find those letters. Edward spoke, his voice small. She mentioned the attic. That evening, Maya and Edward climbed the narrow servant stairwell that led to the third-floor attic. The door creaked open to reveal dust, old trunks, and the scent of forgotten years. They dug through boxes for over an hour, holiday decorations, yellowed linens, antique photo frames. Then Maya spotted a hollow panel behind an armoire. She pried it open. Inside was a small tin box wrapped in velvet. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Letters, dozens of them, all signed by Claire, all written in the final months before she disappeared from public view. She read one aloud to the editor of the Philadelphia Tribune. My name is Claire Moore, and I have evidence that my father attempted to declare my brother legally insane to protect his legacy. This letter may be the first of many. Maya's throat tightened. Edward sat beside her, tears streaming down his cheeks. She fought for me, he whispered.